Welcome, everyone, to another session of Crituitous RP. Thank you for joining us this week. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone a crazy thank you to everyone who has followed us. Last Monday evening, we reached our 100 followers as a big milestone. And as such, we have put out a giveaway. It's going to run for another 2 weeks, so it'll run till a week Monday coming, and then the following session we will announce who the winner is in the session. That contest, the link is in the description. If you enter, you stand a chance to win a legendary bundle from D&D Beyond. Now, I use D&D Beyond like crazy. It's almost always open on my computer because I'm using it while I'm running sessions. I'm using it while I'm preparing for them. And the legendary bundle contains all the 5th edition content to date. That is the Player's Handbook. That is the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Monster's Manual, all of the adventure books. It also includes Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, which we will be talking about today. If you haven't grabbed yourself a copy of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, I definitely recommend it. We will be talking about some things. There will be some discussions in depth about it. So definitely make sure you pick up a copy. Before we do get any further, we would like to welcome our new followers from this past week. Now, please bear with us. As a result of our wonderful contest that's going on, we got an additional 76 followers this week. That's a lot more than the 5 or 6 that I usually read out. So we're going to do it a little bit differently this time. So we are going to read them all. Eventually, at some point, we might not be able to read all of the followers between a session, but we're going to try it today. So I'm going to start. We're going to go me, Carl, Casey, Matthew, me, Carl, Casey, Matthew, and so on. And we're going to read through them from the oldest follower upwards. So everyone has the list in front of them. We are starting with Cinder Master.
Game Drunks OFC.
JTM 119.
Kasim 20.
Norton the Knoll.
Unknown Tragedy.
Pixie Rail.
CE 3K.
Algai D. Siswai.
Core Roleplay.
Future Revolutions.
Gore Cannon.
Roy's your boy.
Blues 12.
Royal 94.
Kennel F. Wriggles. Or no, it's Ken F. Wriggles.
This one's a great one. Can we just skip it?
Kiko Natsuko.
Free Huggles.
BK 32.
Whitney VDM.
Mobley Dick.
Seal Gaming.
Azars 262.
Marcos Gaming VZ.
Arcurus.
Edge Hellfire.
Nick the Indian.
Aphotiadis 1978.
Amadrino.
Barvis Magna 26.
Twitch Vagabundo.
MW00019.
DJ Fulcrum.
Nemo Nautilus 1961.
I can't tell if this is trying to spell something or not, so I think I just have to go letter by letter. I4 DYH4 WK73.
It's Lady Hawk.
I4. It's Lady Hawk. Replacing those vowels with numbers. Lady Hawk 73. There we go.
S_Lancelot.
20 sides to every story.
The Ender God.
Magma 1.
Sorry, that's Manga 1.
Man,
And
I am clearly the weak link on this game today.
Attack Gorilla.
The Doctor.
Line of Death Official.
FGN Turns.
Wandering Paws.
Weeping Seer.
Thimbrius.
Tech 151.
Tark Safalvi.
Dallas Cat.
Code JF.
Yazide 79.
Loveless 81.
Roxwan.
Rambo 1234 Gamer.
Phoenix Nightfire.
Inverted Root.
Huef.
Ice Strider 21.
The Conqueror.
Tarmag.
REI Gunner.
Eddie the Whale.
Koiber.
Mr. Promo 227.
Sumpy Mice.
Dark Susano.
X Baby Girl XXX.
Lad Ha.
Fiery Bull.
Higazi.
Dagger 1819.
Silver Majra.
Radio Raheem's Boombox.
Drat Sab 1.
This has got to be check. Here we go. Sizaska?
Could be.
Sizaska?
Very sorry for our pronunciation of some of these. Shuzuka.
Mostly my pronunciation.
Client Side.
Game Pawn.
And last but not least, Synaptic Wanderer.
Woo! Let's go home!
That's
All right!
Woo!
So thank you everyone for following us, for supporting us. We really appreciate all of this, and make sure to click on that link to then follow all the things. It's Twitter, it's Tumblr, it's everything. And
all these people are in the running for the Legendary Bundle, right?
Indeed.
Which I don't think we said is valued at quite a bit, right, Carl?
Almost $400.
Yeah. So.
And if you have the Legendary Bundle, any additional content that is released later on D&D Beyond also comes with a 15% discount. I have the Legendary Bundle, and it serves me wonderfully. And so, without too much further ado, before we start today's session, we're going to spend some time with Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. We will get to the adventure, and we will do the previously on, and we'll get to the actual thing. But right now, we're going to talk about some of our favorite things about Mordenkainen's. Now, as part of D&D Beyond, I share my content with my players, and as such, even though Casey has already shown that she has a physical copy, my players can read the book when it was released Friday morning. So, without further ado, let's talk about some of our favorite things within Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Personally, I love all of the information about the Blood War. The first chapter is just packed with extra details about the Blood War, the Hells, the demons, fiends, all of that. I will admit that if this book had come out a couple months ago, our trip to Hell would have been completely different. We probably would have met a few more of the key things mentioned within this, the diabolical cults, all sorts of things. So I love the Blood War. My personal favorite part of the Blood War chapter is the discussion about Asmodeus. And particularly, there is a point where Asmodeus was being tried by a judge for his crimes. And the way he got out of it was more or less saying, well, I'm being true to myself, being a little evil, but I'm being true to myself. And yes, I'm turning humanity into demons, into devils, but they're fighting against the demons. So they're the worse evil. I'm good. And then after all of his wonderful arguments, which was just the truth, you had hundreds of angels lining up, trying to argue that he's so evil, so much that the judge got board, and the Angels fought over a big mess. He ended up getting away with it. Loved the stuff in there. What are some of the things that you guys liked that you read about?
I mean, for me, given my character right now, since I'm literally trying to play the devil, I kind of wish this had come out before I'd made Grigori, just because it has so many options. I don't know if I would have changed much. I think it would have definitely influenced kind of the backstory and what I imagine how he's doing. So I need to see if I can, since his backstory hasn't come out too much, maybe I can retcon some of that in my head. But we'll see. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of it. Also, Casey actually got me onto reading a book series called The Brimstone Angels, which is about a tiefling. And the first book in the series is heavily involved in the sixth layer of hell with Glacia and whatnot going on there. And so reading through this, it was kind of fun because I had just finished reading that aspect. And so one of the main characters is a Cambion. There are several of those 13th level lords who are mentioned or present. So it gave some extra depth and detail that I really enjoyed.
I completely agree with you. I like it for the exact same reasons. All this stuff has been established in the D&D universe in previous editions, but I don't think any of us with the exception of Teo, has played a previous. Well, me and Carl have done 3.5, but it was like a stint, and nobody was really lore heavy. So I go and I read all these books that have to do with the series about the past of the Forgotten Realms and stuff, and now I get to see it actually come out into its 5th edition form, which is really the greatest feeling in the world with this book and me.
Casey is a hardcore at this point Wizard of the Coast novel reader, Forgotten Realms series.
I wouldn't call. There are actual hardcore people out there. I would not rank myself among them. But
I've read the one.
I've
read the one. Everyone's hardcore compared to me.
But comparatively speaking to the rest of us, Casey was also the one that suggested I should read the Legend of Drizzt whilst I was running Out of the Abyss. Made a big difference to my view of the City of Mensa Berenson because I had read it and not just taken what the Out of the Abyss book has. So with all of the information that's in here, yes, I'm still trying to get through the plethora of content and books that are out there beforehand, but this stuff cuts it down very nicely and neatly.
Yeah, imagine if you read this, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, first, and then you started on the path of the novels. A lot more would make immediate sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of the Gith. Even going back a few editions and being on bulletin boards and stuff like that, talking about the mechanics of the game. Everyone always, is trying to create the ultimate Gish. The Gish character is a character who is optimized for both melee battle and spellcasting. And whenever I play a character, that's kind of what I want to do, with the exception of Averine. We want to be awesome at spellcasting and awesome at stabbing people with sharp things.
Your new character, Lefcadio, is like that, right?
A little bit. And just the Gith in general, I appreciate. And the lore and all the information that we have here makes me think about our previous campaign and how we think that we might revisit it when we're done with this campaign or sometime in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Since the Gith Yankee are allied with Tiamat, and our party has the dragon masks, which allow her to come to the material plane, I could see Gith Yankee showing up on Artyr's doorstep because everywhere he went, he made sure everyone knew what his name was, and he has a very established address, so he's very easy to find. So I could totally see the Gith Yankee just showing up in their flying ships, and we have flying ships, and they have flying castles, and we have a flying castle. It certainly seems like a brawl that could be rich in lore and blood.
I mean, going back to our previous campaign, there are a lot of minor storylines that haven't really been explored that much. One of the earliest ones that we just kind of put to one side that I still have in my notes to address at some point is the person who taught Loic mental magic and psionics. It was a Gith. And it was a Gith that had instructed Loic through the use of a sending stone how to manipulate magic to use it psionically instead of by manipulating the weave and traditional magic. And there was even a point where Loic got a glimpse of then his master. But since that point, Loic gained a new master that does other things. Now that's at least one Gith that is a little annoyed that he put in a bit of effort and taught another individual psionics, coupled with everything else that you say. Absolutely we're going to be revisiting. There's a whole lot of stuff. You guys made a deal with the devil and destroyed a lot, and probably made yourselves a name in the Hells, so maybe at some point you'll start having to go back and visit those. A lot of cool stuff.
The Githyanki are also enemies of the Githzerai. The Githzerai have their homeland in Limbo, and Limbo is where the Gray Morning Sanctuary?
Incorrect. Pandemonium is where that is located, but he can access Limbo, no problem.
That's right. Limbo and Pandemonium are different things.
Yep.
I think maybe we should say, for anyone watching who hasn't had the chance yet to pick up the tome, so it's really broken into 6 pieces. They have a big chunk on the Blood War, which is all about devils and demons, and it feels like it has a plurality of the space of the book. They have another chapter on elves, all kinds. I know that elves are in the player handbook and other supplements, but this goes into wonderful detail. Similarly, they have a section on dwarves and Duragar that just goes into that much more detail about it. And then the Gith, a chapter on halflings and gnomes, and then a sweet bestiary that has I don't even know how many new and interesting monsters and stat blocks that DMs and players can use.
A lot of these monsters are also from previous editions, so I am just so stoked to have things like the Howler back. Oh boy.
I've already used the Bone Claws in a session earlier today, and that went well.
Turtles as monsters is in there. Turtles previously were available in the Turtle package as player characters, but if anyone's interested in having a Chult adventure, just having turtles out there as NPCs and don't want to go through the effort of having to do character creation, they have stat blocks for turtles and turtle druids.
They have a lot of broken down drow enemies. You got the drow Arachnomancer, Favored Consort, House Captain, Inquisitor, Matron Mother. Oh, I'm going to have some fun with that. I'm running an Out of the Abyss campaign that literally are going to Menzo Barons on next week. So they're going to deal with all of this new wonderful stuff about the elves and the drow.
Did you see where the drow have their own construct?
Mm-hmm.
That thing's pretty cool.
Well, and it's like Aaron said, that as you do these larger expansions, these larger supplements, they are useful for prior supplements as well. They tie in. So back to Out of the Abyss, there are a dozen drow options that what Teo runs this time is going to be significantly different for his new group than what the previous group went through. And I think that's one of the great values you get out of these new books is, of course, you could run through the same adventure multiple times with people and they'd be a little different, but this kind of additional content makes it really different, which helps keep it engaging for players. If you have players who want to play multiple times through the same campaign, keeps it engaging for the DM, because rather than just plugging through the same material again, you get to add new things. Really provides a lot of opportunity for or new hooks for players and DMs.
And it's not all just informational content. It's actually really well written, if you ask me too. It reads a little bit like all these books, like Volo's Guide is the same way. It reads kind of like a textbook, but it's broken up, and you can see there's a little bit of personality slipped in here and there and there. And I've always been interested in who Mordenkainen is, because I've always felt I identify with him a little bit. So it's been nice to...
But this book takes an interesting spin on that concept, though. I do get the sense that, obviously, Mordenkainen did not intend on this book to be read by other people. And so you've got annotations from other people being added in, and they even say at the beginning that Mordenkainen doesn't want you reading this book. So, of course, you've got to read it.
Yeah,
well, it starts out with, Quart is, I am a student of Mordenkainen, so I paid someone to steal this book for me because I think it's useful to have. But then there's a great quote right as you start reading the book. There are no small betrayals by Mordenkainen. So I don't know what happened to Quart. That would be interesting to know. But there's this idea that it's, it's an apprentice or a historian trying to salvage this and put it together because it's a book of historical significance.
And every Wizards of the Coast book, at least for 5th edition, I haven't really checked the previous ones, have had a wonderful disclaimer at the front. I love the disclaimers. For example, Tomb of Annihilation. The party is currently going through Tomb of Annihilation adventure. The disclaimer in that one is, this adventure will make your players hate you. The kind of simmering hatred that eats away at their souls until all that remains are dark little spheres of annihilation where their hearts used to be. P.S. Don't forget to tear up their character sheets. So that's a great disclaimer. The disclaimer for Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. We asked Mordenkainen to write a humorous disclaimer for this book, and we got this response. The day I start writing frivolous disclaimers for game manuals, particularly one riddled with text stolen from my notes, is the day I retire from wizardry and abandon all self-respect. The tone on that book.
He needs to get a better sense of humor.
Yeah.
So I do have some grievances, some criticisms.
You do?
Yeah. So I've read the section on the Gith, and I am a couple sections, or I read the chapter on the Gith, and I'm a couple sections into the Blood War. And what I have noticed so far is a lack of maps. Like the Gith Yankee have, they describe 3 different types of ships, of different sizes for different purposes. And the Githzerai have these adamantine ziggurats, or constructs that they use to travel from plane to plane. And they just, there is some art of the Gith Yankee homeland and the Gith in the astral plane and the Gith Yankee ships and stuff like that. But I would like, just as a player, and I imagine a DM would like these maps too. Mm-hmm. And I see Casey holding her finger up. What does she have to say? Nothing?
Well, I was going to say there could be an in-character reason for that, and that is because Mordenkainen's journal was stolen, and maybe he keeps his maps elsewhere.
Maybe. But yeah, so I read a couple sections in the Blood War, and they describe the different the different layers of the Hells, and some cities within those layers, and not a map to be found. I appreciate all the detail and all the lore and stuff, but I would appreciate it just a little bit more with a visual reference, saying, this is what the city of Dis looks like. These are walls, these are roads. Here's a landmark here. We can go online and in the wikis and stuff like that and find that stuff. But what I thought this book would be. It would be a reason not to have to go do those things and go extracurricular.
Well, you make a good point there. To date, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, people that might be watching or people watching later, correct me if I'm wrong, to date there isn't a 5th edition re-release of the Map of the Hells. There are older editions, there are older ones, which are adequate. But I'd like a new updated image as I'm reading about the Blood Wars. Just had to double check.
Like in Volos, they have chapters on different, the different races, and then each race has like a sample dungeon, like the Yuan-Ti shrine or temple or something like that. So it would have been nice to have something equivalent. But I mean, as far as grievances go, that it's a minor one.
It's a small one. Another thing yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and there's always the give and take to that, right? Like having the maps on the one hand is extremely useful as a resource. On the other hand, it can be somewhat limiting because now you feel like, well, do I need to use the map? If it's not defined, players and DMs are a little more free to use their imagination to create what they want.
I think you mispronounced compelled.
Compelled. And I mean, there's the argument that all these materials are resources. So DM could, of course, create their own and disregard pre-established maps. Same with the characters. But I think whenever they put things out, there is this idea, this is the official material and this is how it has to be. So I sometimes wonder if, the concept art is put out and nothing else, specifically because they do not want to confine people to one particular configuration or another. Whether or not that is what they're actually thinking, I don't know, but I certainly think that is some of the case.
Yeah, when it comes to designing a largely creative kind of play style of the game, like Dungeons and Dragons, it's probably a very, very fine line between how much content to offer before it becomes a video game sort of situation.
Another point that I really liked is the detail in the Eladrin. Now, I'm not going to go too much into detail. You guys should read up on all of the elf section yourselves. It's a great section. But as a result of that, got a player in a game that is now going really into the season shifting for the Eladrin. So even with that, I think I'm not going to go into like search for the section, but there is a blessing that can be provided from Corallan. DMs can give their elves a blessing. Yes, Blues 12 maps are good. I personally agree with you. Saves me a lot of trouble. I like getting the maps. But the blessing from Corallan allows an elf to choose to change gender at night when they have a long rest. As a result, I've got a player that wants to be an Eladrin that is going to completely, every night, he's going to decide, okay, which season am I going to be for the next 24 hours and which gender? And so we went through and we rolled different personality traits and flaws for all of the different combinations. A male and female winter, male and female summer, male and female spring, and so on. Because personality traits might be different depending on how they feel. However they want to feel that day is how they are going to be, who they're going to be. They have the freedom to do that, which I really like with the Eladrin. So
for those of us who haven't read the Eladrin, you get 4 different personalities and you wake up to a different ability set and armor set based on the season?
And with the gender, technically it's 8 different characters in one.
Ooh. So you can wake up in the summer male or female, and then in the winter male or female?
That's what we've done for this particular player. The Eladrin specifically I'll read it out. An Eladrin is associated to one of the 4 seasons and has coloration reminiscent of that season, which can also affect the Eladrin's mood. Autumn, winter, spring, summer. Some Eladrin remain associated with a particular season for their entire lives, whereas other Eladrin transform, adopting characteristics of a new season. Okay. And so we just went all the way with that. Really pushed the Eladrin shifting, and particularly like some of the abilities also with the Eladrin change. An Eladrin gets Phase Step. That has an additional ability depending on which season they are currently associated with. So mechanically, they're also different. It's not just theoretic, like thematic or roleplay. There's actually mechanical differences, which is cool.
Well, and speaking of mechanics, I will admit my favorite part of this whole book is when the DM says, "Hey, I found something neat I'd like to give you out of this new book. Would you like it?" To which the answer has to be, yeah, sure. So that was a pleasant treat, which keep watching, stay tuned. Maybe there are dozens, if not hundreds, of different boons and abilities that you could give players that players could pick from. So stay tuned to find out if that ever comes up. So
if you want to keep it hidden, you can do.
Oh, well, it's going to be quiet until we discussed when it might manifest itself. We'll just keep it quiet till then. Keep our fellow players in suspense as well.
Sounds good.
Secrets.
Yeah. Anything else that you guys particularly liked about Mordenkainen? I'm going to go into some of my favorite monsters. But do you have anything from the main lore book section that you guys particularly enjoyed?
They don't have a map of it, naturally, but the home. I'll just say it's the home. The home of the Githyanki is amazing. That blew my imagination wide open. I was like, oh my gosh. I don't know. Should I say it, or you want me to?
You can go ahead.
Okay, the Githyanki have this enormous city floating in the astral plane, on top of the corpse of a 6-armed dead deity from like way before deities were actually a thing. They're just floating on it.
That's very Guardian of the Galaxy Nowhere-esque.
Any book chapter that starts with a picture of someone riding a dragon is a good chapter.
Oh yeah, and the way that they use red dragons like guard dogs. That's very impressive. If that tells you anything about the level at which your characters need to be in order to start tangling with the Gith, it's pretty high up there. I also liked their leader lady, who tries her very best to keep them occupied while they're in the city, and she still can't do a good enough job, and they end up destroying whole buildings in their raucous partying. It seemed like jolly folk. Malicious, but jolly.
Malicious but jolly. Well, and you bring up a good point. As a supplement, while a lot of this builds so much background and so much lore, don't let your eyes get bigger than your stomach, as it were, right? You could very easily be like, oh man, I definitely want to play X, Y, or Z, but you can't, except for maybe using some of these monsters, you can't, this is not level 1 material, this is not level 3 material. To interact with any of the characters involved in the main chapters, you got to be high tier if you want to survive, I think. But that's true of most supplements, right? You're not the player's handbook is intended to get you going first couple levels, and then beyond that.
I'd say Sword Coast Adventures Guide was like baseline, and then Volo's was maybe like level 5 around-ish, getting up maybe.
I don't want to say that Mordenkainen is just for high-level stuff, because there are builds for options for new builds, options for new abilities that would come in at first level, but the mythologies that are being built there, interacting with at a low level is suicide. So
Yeah, you're talking about walking around randomly in the Nine Hells and stuff.
sure.
Yeah.
Which you don't do at first level. No, I mean we have a new stream that's going to be starting in a week tomorrow. Yeah, the 27th. We will be starting a new campaign, Half Rate Heroes. It should be a good one. It is a homebrew adventure, but the homebrew adventure, it is going to involve interplanar travel. As such, the players are a higher level to start with, just because the moment you start leaving the material plane and you start dealing with other areas, even so simple as the Feywild, that could be such an extreme. The Hells, of course, very dangerous, no matter who you are. And so, yeah, while it can cater for the early levels, most of the lore in here is most beneficial to those higher ones.
Did you guys play World of Warcraft back in the day?
To a degree.
It's
Yeah.
like the expansion maps.
If you're going to talk about the monsters, I have the D&D Beyond on the screen, but if I go to the monsters, you also see their stat blocks, and I think the artwork is amazing for not just the monsters, but all the scenes and stuff. I think you said you were going to have this content on Roll20.
Yes, in fact, I can grab them and put them into Roll20 if you would like, or we can just go through on D&D Beyond. Because I did purchase the Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes is available as a compendium expansion in Roll20.
Well, I could click on each of the monsters, but I don't also want to show all their stat blocks for reasons.
Makes sense.
So if it's not too inconvenient, if you're going to talk about a monster, do you want to throw them up on Roll20?
Can do, yeah. All right, so we will go with just straight away my favorite one out of the lot of them. Okay, I run 12 sessions a week at this point, and I've told a couple, pretty much every group since Friday morning, that this one in particular is my favorite. And I will pull it into the Tomb of Annihilation homepage.
The Tempest!
It is the Elder Tempest. Now, one of the reasons why it's my favorite is at the moment when the book was released, I was just getting done with a session where the players had been in the elemental plane of air and had been fighting against a sentient cloud and a sentient storm, more or less. And then I look at the book and they have literally a storm that is alive, that is the big bad, as it were. Now, this is CR23, much higher than those players could have dealt with anyway. But here's some of the things that I particularly love about this, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about this particular creature, but you've got a CR23 creature which has legendary actions, that is a legendary creature. What's the one thing you give it? Flyby. Now, Flyby is an incredible ability in every group that I run where you have a spellcaster that has a familiar. They always pick the owl because the owl has Flyby. The owl can then fly in, do the help action, fly out, no risk of opportunity attacks. So what do you do with a creature that is CR23, that's gargantuan? You give it the ability to not provoke opportunity attacks when it flies out of an enemy's range. Nice. Just nice.
How do you fight it?
Well, don't get into melee range with it because its lightning storm is insane. All other creatures within 120 feet of the Tempest must make a dex save or take damage. 120 feet of it. So you don't fight against this thing.
Wait, so if you make the dex save, you don't take any damage, or do you take half damage?
Half damage.
You don't fight, you run.
Yeah. Isn't this thing supposed to be like a demi-titan kind of thing?
And
Yeah.
what they've done is and it's neutral, so it might not, unless the DM wants it to attack you, it might not attack you. They've created one of these big, uber powerful elemental creatures for each of the elemental planes, for each of the elemental types. But going one step down below that, the Myrmidons, or the is that right? How I pronounce that? Let me just make sure I pronounced it correctly. Yeah, Myrmidons. So they've also created Myrmidons for each particular race. I will pull them up into Roll20 for us.
And I think that the strongest things that were divided elementally like that before were the genies.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? So this is one step above them.
No, this is below the genie in terms of CR level and above the elementals. So if you've got a group of players that you want to experience elemental forces, maybe you're playing Princes of the Apocalypse or similar campaigns. There we go. Right, Roll20 is just going to take a while to bring all 4 of those things in. There we go. There's one of them. So and I will pull it up to zoom in. That is the Earth Elemental Myrmidon. So the idea of a Myrmidon is they summoned an Earth Elemental, but while summoning it, they summoned it into a suit of armor. How do you make an elemental better? You give it plate armor, and you strip its memories so that it doesn't know that it's an elemental. And they've done that for each of these. And so with a group that are going through elemental warfare, it's a little bit more powerful for each of these particular races. In fact, you should be able to see an actual picture of the full air elemental there. Correct?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, cool. You might need to click away from the... There we go. So these are air elementals, but just improved ever so slightly. And it allows you to keep those elemental forces involved in the gameplay for another couple levels. They've got water and they've also got fire as well for each of them. I really like the elemental content. I've really liked it.
So what level wizard do you need to be in order to summon one of these beasts? They're CR 10?
These are CR 7.
7. Okay, so it's CR 5 to conjure an elemental. That's 5th level spell. So
I haven't figured out how that's done yet.
it's gonna land well before the epic levels.
Oh yeah. Well.
So you can definitely do that if your character is a wizard and they know the conjure elemental. You can summon these guys.
Right. Are there any monsters that you guys had taken a look at all?
Everything in Pandemonium.
Everything in Pandemonium. Fair enough.
Let's see. The 2 ones that stood out to me there were the Howlers, of course, which are like insanity dogs.
Mm-hmm.
They scream at you and you lose your mind. And then the other ones that were particularly cool were the Oblexes. Oblexi? It's plural of that.
That
Is it
goes
like
on,
moose?
bro.
It's just Oblex.
It's like Elder Oblex, Adult Oblex in the table of contents that we're looking at. But an Oblex is the overarching thing, and what it is, it starts off as a tiny ooze, and then it eats somebody and absorbs their memories, and eventually, if it lives for long enough, it can produce, change its form and produce like a lure of a person to get you to come say hi. So that's particularly deadly and awesome. And then there's another thing that has to do with Jublex, that it's a creature that spawns from coming off of Jublex. It looks like moss. It is an ooze, And what it does is it gathers around windows and portals and doorways and things, and it actually over time turns them into portals to another dimension, the abyss specifically, I think. So you can randomly have like a portal to the abyss hanging out somewhere where there's moss that doesn't look like anything.
That does not sound good to me.
Well, depending on your point of view. I think Loic would really enjoy just to play with one, really.
He'd totally try to turn one into a pet. I don't know. It's the abyss, though. That's where all of his enemies are.
And it is worth noting, there are a couple of individual characters who are important individual NPCs that have stat blocks here, like Jubilex. But also, we finally get the stat block for Orcus in this expansion, which, whether you care for that or not, I always feel like, ever since 4th edition, when Orcus was on the cover page, I always feel like eventually Orcus comes out, and here he was. So that was something that caught my eye, at least. And I think I've had some stuff, if you wanted to play in before, you could kind of make do, but here you have in one place, single stat block, single description, for all you high-level NPCs out there.
Now, the demon princes in particular bring up a good point by discussing Orcus. Orcus, Zugtamoy, Demogorgon, Gratz, Frazer Blue, Jublex, all of these demon princes, they are included at the back of the Out of the Abyss campaign adventure book. If you want to bring them into a campaign but don't want to buy the campaign book, well, they're included in here. That's something that I've enjoyed seeing Wizards of the Coast start doing a little bit more lately. Is you don't have to get every book to have all of the content that you want. If you, as a DM, can't afford it, it completely makes sense. You're not going to want to go out and get every single book. So you go out, you get the module that you want. But what they've done is here, they've included the Demon Prince's stat blocks in here. Also, Deep Gnomes as a race are included in this book, I believe. Let me double check.
Yeah, previously they appeared.
They were in the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So now, if you want the Demon Princes, you can either get the Out of the Abyss campaign or Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. If you want the Deep Gnomes in your campaign as a player option, you either buy Sword Coast Adventurers Guide or you buy Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. I like that. I like that they do that. They mix things up a little bit like that.
One more gripe, because why not? They also have the stat blocks for the Archdevils, each of the levels, except for Asmodeus or Asmodeus. He is absent, and that's probably because he's a god as well as a devil. And once you start putting stats on a god, then whatever. But
then players will want to kill him.
Exactly. Yes.
If he has a stat block, there must be a way to kill him.
Right. Exactly.
But there's a saying, if it bleeds, you can kill it. In D&D, if it has a stat block, you can kill it. So.
I don't think they'll put a stat block together that says specifically immune to all damage. It would be interesting to see what his stats would be, though. Because I see him as maxed out charisma, maybe not maxed out wisdom. I don't know.
And we likely never will, because Wizards of the Coast probably will never make that kind of stat block.
Fun fact, though, they came very close to an idea in the Aaron Evans books that you're reading. That's
the Brimstone Angels book Sarah referred to earlier.
They did kind of figure out how to kill him, but you can't really kill gods. They just transfer energy into a different form, sometimes with consciousness, sometimes without. So they always have a chance of coming back. But somebody did try to figure it out, and they almost got there.
Well, and gods could potentially transfer consciences through cult members. Foreshadowing.
And then one last beast that I want to highlight. Then unless there's anything else people want to discuss, we can move on. Is one that I was surprised to see, and that was a frost salamander.
Yeah, that was a little bit weird. I was like, where are the other kinds of salamanders?
Yeah. So let me see if I can grab a frost salamander.
Well, and a salamander traditionally is always a fire salamander, right?
Always. You just think
going
salamander
back,
and...
Sure. Going back to Beowulf, since the middle Dark Ages, it's been understood that salamanders are fire.
Salamanders are actually a monster in D&D already in 5e, and they are the creatures that we fought back in Iron Slag in the very beginning, where they were like naga people, fish naga people, made out of copper scales and do fiery things.
Were they well, precisely. So because, salamanders are so associated with fire in a variety of games or literature or whatever else, they're just always associated mythically. I mean, a phoenix is associated with fire. That's whatever book you're reading, whatever mythology you're reading, that's just what it is. Same with salamanders. So getting a frost salamander's weird. I mean, exciting, good. It's nice to have the option, but different.
Do you know why salamanders are associated with fire?
I mean, the best I can tell is because in Beowulf, they had salamanders who blew fire, but it was probably around even before that.
Well, let me tell you, salamanders live in decaying wood. So often when people would set up a fire, they would grab this wood and they would build a fire, and then all these lizards would come crawling out of the fire. So that's why salamanders are associated with fire.
There you go.
You learn a new thing every day.
The more you know.
Courtesy of Averine. Going on the frost salamanders, also one thing that I liked about the lore of it is frost salamanders are native to the plane of ice. Now, the area called Frostfell, which rests between the plane of air and plane of water. This is the first time I personally have really seen or focused on the in-between planes that are in between the different ones. You've got the plane of air that touches the plane of water, and you've got the area in between. Then water mixes with earth, earth mixes with fire, and fire mixes with air. And you have locations that are mixed in between that are different than the native planes. And it's nice to see a creature come specifically from the middle place between two planes. So it's not quite... it can be present in the plane of air, can be present in the plane of water. Most likely, it'll be native to the plane of ice. Yeah.
Though, and I will say, looking at the frost salamander, they've not abandoned fire completely. He has an ability, freezing breath, which is essentially just a cold breath weapon. It has for a charge, but he also has the burning fury feature. If he ever takes any fire damage, he auto recharges his freezing breath. So there's still that fire aspect to it, but then additionally, a player would think, hey, it's a nice guy, he'll be weak to fire, and all you're doing is charging him up every time you hit him. So.
And there are some nice mechanics that I'm liking to see in here that I haven't really seen recently in other monster stat blocks, like an enemy monster with flyby. There are monsters that have reach out to 15 foot, and as a reaction, can attack creatures as they come in. That is part of their stat block. They effectively have the polearm master feat, but their arms are their polearms. These are things that I have liked throwing at some of my players specifically because they weren't expecting a creature that could do that. I mean, they run up to a creature and then they say, stop 15 foot ahead. It's going to grapple you. So it's nice to surprise the players to some degree. It's nice to give them something they haven't seen before. Like a CR26 creature.
Is anybody familiar with the Elder Evils from any of the previous editions or any of the stories or anything?
Nope.
Only from the lore that I've read whilst researching the Princes of the Apocalypse campaign to run that one.
I've done a lot of research myself, and it's I've never been able to get very many concrete facts about these guys, but they do touch on it in this book, and I think that this might be the first touching of that 5e has done so far. These guys are supposed to be like evil primordials, sort of. They come from the time before time before time, and a couple of them have been known to cross worlds and actually came from different D&D universes. So they're getting into that, and I am super stoked about that as well. I just wanted to mention that before we move on, because how can you not talk about the Elder Evils?
I'm certainly looking forward to the next adventure manual that Wizards puts out, that D&D put out there. Speaking of which, June 1st, 2nd and 3rd, I think the dates are. Just need to double check. That is the Stream of Many Eyes. Go check out twitch.tv/D&D on those dates to watch the Stream of Many Eyes, where the next adventure manual will be teased and featured, just like they teased and featured the Tomb of Annihilation in the Stream of Annihilation. The Stream of Many Eyes will have some adventure coming out. I don't think it'll be called Something of Many Eyes, but it might. And I will definitely be watching it. I'll definitely be wanting to check out what they've got, because part of me is hoping that this lore book that we've just released will feed into that adventure. I hope it'll build up and allow us to have a bigger, almost more in-depth adventure if you have read this one before taking on the adventure. Yeah. All right. Is there anything else that, without going too much into detail in the book, because I want you guys to go out and get the book, read it, check it out, whether it's through our Legendary Bundle giveaway, D&D Beyond, or if it's just through going out and getting your own copy. Definitely check out Mordenkainen's Tome. Not sponsored.